and welcome back. Today I'm going to be unboxing and filling my brand new palette. I'm pretty sure this palette is for watercolors, but I'm going to put my gouache in here. Specifically my Holbein gouache. I have all of the Iridori sets, so all of the seasons, all of those colors, plus a primary set, plus I have gotten a couple other colors like primary magenta that wasn't in any of those sets, and I have a couple of Caran d'Ache primary colors as well. So I have quite a bit of colors. Despite having every color under the sun, I find myself not using my gouache just because it's packed away in a drawer because there's so many of them, and I get a lot of decision fatigue, and I just don't feel like, I guess, like digging for it and making those decisions about what to pour out. I think being able to have the gouache all in front of me in these smaller amounts in almost like digestible bits is really going to help me actually use it because I spent a lot of money on it and I need to use them. So this pan that I got is by Pev Art, and it's labeled as an empty watercolor paint palette case. It has 52 empty half pans, and with all of the colors that I have, I should be able to fill up at the very least 46 of these pans. So I'm definitely going to be using most of these pans. The water brush that it comes with, I won't be using that. I think I threw that away. And then the travel little pouch case, I probably won't use that either, but I did save that. I also made this custom swatch sheet to fit inside the pan. As you can see, I already had a swatch sheet for all of my gouache paints, but I didn't swatch them correctly. Like, I didn't drag the paints down to see their watered down versions, so I couldn't see like the undercolors in them, and often that would lead to me choosing the wrong colors. So I needed a new swatch sheet regardless. So this is what it looks like immediately after I completely filled the palette. And this is what it looks like after about a week of use. Still pretty full. You can definitely see that I've been using a lot of the yellows and greens and blues. I did mix up this color because I felt like I was missing a pink. And anytime that I would mix white with any of the magentas, purples, or reds, it just wasn't giving me the right color. So I needed kind of a more dynamic pink, and I mixed that up and put it there. Generally though, I don't see me needing to mix a lot of colors because I have a lot of convenience colors. As you can see, I did take out one of the panels, and to close it, like to make it close and stay closed, I did have to bend these back a little bit because the position that they were in was allowing that third panel to go in there. I still have it here, but I'm probably not going to take this out anywhere, and I feel like this third panel here is kind of used for a palette. I could still use it as a palette inside, but I don't like the metal for a palette. I don't like the way that it beads up, so I just use my ceramic palette, and this just kind of mostly got in the way. If ever I wanted to put it back, there's this pin here that I could just slide it back in and slide the pin back in and it'd be good as new. But yeah, I didn't like it, so didn't want to use it. Now, the first thing that I tried to do is I had this acrylic painting that was kind of like halfway done, and I've had this idea in my head that I want to mix acrylic and gouache paint because I think the contrast between the two finishes, being shiny and matte, would look so great if it's done well. I'm going to spare you the difficult process of me trying to get this gouache to stick to the acrylic background. I completely ruined this. I did leave this in because I feel like I've been saying that in the last couple videos that I want to mix the two, and I think this is where I'm just going to let the dream die. I don't need to mix them. They can just be separate. I actually just moved on to a brand new spread, blank canvas, and did an entire illustration with gouache. I have a rough sketch here of a bouquet of flowers, and I did have a reference from Pinterest, but I was mostly inspired by it. I wasn't trying to copy it directly. The idea is that I want this to be really asymmetrical. So the kind of ornate vase and a lot of the base flowers over on the right. Over on the left, it's kind of like a little bit more bare, and it's kind of like all of those overflow flowers that are kind of leaning. At first I was worried it would look a little empty, but the way that it comes together, I like the contrast between the two pages of being really full and then just being over on the left being more simplistic. So to start off here, I started with a wash of this olive green, and I'm going to be using this olive green as a mother color or a unifying color. Essentially, every color that I put on this illustration is going to have a little bit of that olive green in it to make it look like everything on the page is in the same room. My process with painting is basically just blocking in colors and then adding details. I like to work back to front. I don't always follow that rule, I guess. Sometimes I do jump around, but generally I like to work back to front. And with this illustration, I'm kind of treating the vase and the flowers as their own entities. So with the vase, I blocked in the color, did the shadows, the highlights, and essentially finished it and didn't go back to it. And then I moved on to the flowers, did the blocking in of the colors, and then slowly added detail to those. I'm going to talk a whole lot more about my art process in this actual illustration, but before we do that, I want to talk about the palette more. Now that I've used it and kind of gotten used to it, I feel like I have a fully formed opinion. So things that I like about it, I definitely like that all my gouache is in one place and I don't have to go digging around for it. Also, the swatch sheet is right there with the paint. So there's no going back and forth of looking at the swatch sheet trying to find the color. It's all there in one place, and I like that. That kind of leads into my next point of it just makes my art process easier to start. It's less setup, and that kind of goes for like my entire art process, not just for these gouache paints. When I'm struggling to start these days, I find myself getting this palette out and kind of doing like warm-up paintings, like you would do warm-up sketches. Like it's much easier just to grab this and to start. Just put something on the page and try to get your hands warmed up that way. I've really been enjoying that. Some things that I don't like about it is it's very heavy, or it's not even that heavy. It's just a lot heavier than I guess I was anticipating. And because of that, I don't think that I would take this out anywhere. Not that I'm particularly a plein air painter by any means, but if I wanted to take art supplies, I feel like I would need to get a smaller one. Even though it is kind of like compact compared to some like home setups, it's not very stable, I guess you would say. And I could fix that easily, and I probably will, by just getting some of those stick-on magnets, because it's a metal tin and I could just put a magnet on the plastic pan and magnetize it to the tin, and I feel like that would solve it. But also, one worry that I had, and this is more about gouache in general, not the pan. With putting my gouache paints in the pan, I was worried that I wouldn't be able to reactivate them to the point that they would be like out of the tube gouache, and that I would have to use what's in this pan as watercolor. And that is true if you don't wait. If I wet the paints and then close it back up and wait like a good 20-30 minutes, sometimes even an hour, and you go back, the moisture completely permeates the entire pan and it turns the paint back into like the regular gouache paint you would get out of the tube, which I was really excited about. Some colors, and I'm sure this has to do with the different pigments and how they're made, but some of them, when they reactivate, they're a little bit more like gritty, but for the most part, they reactivate and they're good as new. Another worry that I had about putting all my gouache in this tin is the mess and like the potential of mixing the colors unintentionally. I'm pretty good about not making a mess when it comes to my art mediums. Not with everything in my life, but when it comes to my art mediums, I'm pretty good about organizing them and not making a huge mess with them. But one of my biggest horror stories is seeing those people that have, and I think this is mainly like a watercolor kind of thing, but you see people with those palettes that the color is just everywhere and all the colors are mixed together. You can't really tell what color is what because there's just pigment everywhere, and that would drive me crazy. I feel like if I had to work from that palette, I would never do art because I would be so scatterbrained from the start. That's a me thing. It is a me thing. But I was worried that that kind of thing was inevitable with these like style of pans. My palette has gotten like a little messy, but definitely nowhere near the level of some of the stuff I've seen. And some people work like that. Sometimes that is like freeing to people, and that's how they like to make art, and they like it chaotic, just to go and be free. And to me, freedom means having a clear space and a clear head to do things. If I'm like going into a mess, it's just, I don't know. That's just how my brain works. As far as the illustration itself, I was actually really happy with this paper. Now, if you've seen my past 2 videos, I was actually finishing up what I called my ugly sketchbook, and it was basically just a poor quality sketchbook. This sketchbook that I'm working in now is a moleskin, and it has much better paper, and I actually have an updated opinion on it because I think in the past I've said that I didn't really like moleskin, and that's why I haven't used it. That's why this is one of the sketchbooks that are just laying around that I need to use up. I actually have 2. So there's a second one after I finish this one. Previously, I tried to use watercolored pencil, and the way that the watercolored pencil and with all of the water kind of mixed with the paper, I really didn't like it, and I kind of took that as like it didn't take wet mediums well. And I think it's a combination of 2 things. I don't think that I'm skilled enough in watercolored pencil to form an opinion, and I just don't think this was the correct paper for that specific medium. But for acrylic and gouache, and I would venture to say even traditional watercolor, the moleskin is not bad. It's definitely not the best. It's a hot pressed paper that's thinner than like traditional watercolor journals. So it's definitely not the best. It's definitely going to warp, but as far as being able to illustrate in the way that you want to, it's really not bad. Especially with gouache. I feel like gouache typically isn't as watery as watercolor, as you could imagine. So it does do a little bit better, but acrylic, you'll see in the sketchbook tour for this book, I have quite a few pages that I did acrylic paintings, and it actually works really well. I mean, it is still a piece of paper, and it's like, it ends up still being floppy, but for like a painting book, I feel like I really like the moleskin. To come to that realization now is actually kind of upsetting. I've seen videos recently of people saying that moleskin has recently changed their paper, like in the way that like they didn't make an announcement that they changed their paper, but like they changed something that they didn't think anybody would notice, and everybody was like, yeah, we noticed your paper's not as good now. It was one of those things, and I bought these moleskins before that happened. So when I'm done with this book and the whole other book, because it's essentially empty, if I've fallen in love with this paper, that's just too bad, I guess. Moving back to talking about the actual artwork, because it's starting to come together now. I had so much fun creating this. One, because again, I did this illustration immediately after working on some pretty crappy paper. So to be able to illustrate in the way that I wanted to was so much fun. But also within this illustration, I'm actually trying a couple of techniques that I don't usually go for. For one, I'm doing the full spread. Usually I treat each paper like its own entity. With the spread, I usually kind of like match the colors, so like when you open the book, it looks like those 2 pages go together. But I don't usually kind of let the illustrations spill over, especially in books that have kind of like a bad gutter, and the moleskin does have quite a bit of gutter, like the dip in the middle, because that's really annoying. Not impossible, but it's annoying to kind of get rid of in post and digitally. And especially with this one being so full, that gutter's kind of gotten worse. But you know, I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would. And I definitely love the asymmetry of this bouquet of flowers. And you know, one thing that I liked that I did not think that I was gonna like is the unifying color being green. Usually my unifying color, if I want it to be like a warm tone, I'll use yellow. If I want it to be like a cool kind of like dreamy tone, I'll use blue. But I've never actually used green because I was always worried about it looking kind of like swampy and weird. And not weird as in like the art looks bad, I mean weird like having a weird feeling to it. Choosing your undertone or your mother color or your unifying color, whatever you want to call it, it sets the tone for your illustration. And I guess I kind of had this bias that green, like the feeling that it gives when it's used for kind of like an undertone, would kind of give you like an eerie, swampy feeling. Like I like to use yellows a lot as an undertone because that gives you a very warm, inviting, joyful kind of feeling. If I want to go for more of like a dreamy, surreal feeling, that's when I go for the blue. In my opinion, I think the green kind of does give it like, I don't want to call it swampy or weird, but like it definitely has its own feeling to it, you know? And I haven't really put my finger on what that is, but with the subject, with the vase kind of being like ornate, with the flowers being kind of like traditional and pretty, and then the contrast of the thorns with it in the bouquet where they're there but they belong. And it's kind of like all of these elements maybe normally wouldn't go together, or maybe normally it would, because we know that there's thorns on roses, but you don't normally see thorns within like curated bouquets, especially not with poppies. So you're still getting that warmness from the yellows, but there's also that element of there's something unusual here. There's something that maybe normally we would say doesn't belong here, but it works here somehow, and it's meant to be here. Overall, I'm really happy with this illustration. One thing that I've been working on in my illustrations is making things look a little bit more impressionistic, and what I really like about that is when you have those bold brush strokes and those bold transitions of color to explain light. And I don't think that I completely accomplished that within this illustration, and I think it's because of the gouache, and part of that is I'm not used to doing those techniques with gouache. And another part is gouache in watery mediums, they're just softer. And I think it really takes a little bit of extra effort to separate those brush strokes and to really make sure, honestly, just to be patient and to make sure everything's completely dry before you add layers. Because if you don't, they kind of bleed into each other and create more of a softer look. So that kind of style that I've been going for, if I want to do that in gouache, I think I'm going to have to have a little bit more patience. I don't think that I'm ever going to lock myself down to one medium, but I do have a style that's been developing, and I want to be able to portray it through the different mediums that I like to use. I feel like the techniques that I've been trying to perfect are easier with acrylic, but definitely not impossible with gouache. Maybe impossible with watercolor, but I don't really use watercolor all that much, and that's probably why. After this spread, I did do some more gouache paintings, but I did a few of them off camera just because I wanted to play with the gouache. It had been a while since I really had the opportunity to play with it. Immediately after that though, I got a new medium. I decided to try out acrylic inks, and there's going to be a couple of videos coming out on that. But the acrylic inks kind of serve as a bridge to get back into acrylic paint as opposed to gouache. So I think this is going to be the last gouache illustration for a while. But we'll definitely be doing some more gouache at some point. Currently, I've actually been doing really good about my weekly uploads. Technically, I've been creating so much art, I could make more, but I don't want to push myself since I've just gotten back into doing YouTube. This is only my third video since I've really gotten back into it. If you're liking my videos so far, don't forget to leave a like. And definitely subscribe if this is the type of content that you're interested in. These are definitely my favorite videos to make, where I'm just doing art and talking about art. I don't have a lot of art people in my real life, so being able to get on here and just nerd out about art supplies is my favorite thing. And if you need a space like that too, feel free to nerd out in the comments. But yeah, that's going to be it for me this week. I'll see you next week. Bye.